The solutions are out there. We have the ability to build the future that we all want. More often than not, what stands in the way are, outdated processes or procedures that don't care first and foremost about an outcome, but care first and foremost about doing something the way that we've always done it, right? So if what stands in our way is not the technological expertise, it's not the breakthrough, what stands in our way is a process, we can fix a process, right? Like these processes were not, chiseled on tablets on the top of Mount Sinai and brought down to us, right? Like there was a way to solve these things quickly. We invented them, we can stop them, right? So if it's paperwork standing in the way, we can solve that. If we've got someone who can make, high performing transmission lines, right? Or supercomputers to be able to do all the optimizations we need, all right, the tough part's done. We just got to do the process. Give me that. Like that we can work our way through.
The moment of introducing new technology in any industry is an important one, and it requires a lot of resolve, grit, as they often say in the startup world. There are many things that require grit, including pursuing a career in different capacities, from politics to business development. Today's guest on our PowerUp live stage here at RE Plus Northeast is Ben Downing, someone who has explicit experience, deep experience with both sides of the public eye, as it were, having been one of the youngest state senators here in the state of Massachusetts, and also having spent 4 years with one of the leading solar companies in the nation, Nexamp. We are going to dig into the work he's doing, accelerating hard tech. What is tough tech and how do we bring it to market? That and more here at the PowerUp live stage, brought to you by Conductor Solar, Encore Renewable Energy, and Solar Simplified. Thanks for tuning in. Ben, it's good to have you on the stage.
Nico, I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that you have, you've experienced in politics, you've experienced, which itself is a lot about business development and building consensus. Okay. You parlayed that experience into a 4-year journey with Nexamp, and I'd love to hear what were some of your key learnings going from the politics world into private industry, and in particular, trying to foster more solar around the United States?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me more than anything else, Nico, was I came out of 10 years in elective office, and my only experience post-college, right, having been in the public sector, I came out of that and thought, all right, this is a bubble, and I'm going to go out into the wider world, and everyone's going to be better at communicating. And while it's definitely true that politics is a special kind of bubble and a hard one to crack, I found that no matter what industry we're in, we all have our own language, and the better able we are to recognize that and get outside of it, the quicker you are to be able to see different opportunities, make new connections, help the organizations that you're a part of grow and scale and achieve their goals. So it was a little bit of a wake up and a check on some of my assumptions.
You spent a lot of time traveling to locations outside of New England, where you all are based here in Boston. Was there anything that particularly surprised you or stands out to you as a gap that you just didn't expect or anticipate, maybe a headwind facing the industry?
Well, let me start with a positive, right? Which is like coming out of Massachusetts and coming out of the Northeast. I think while we're proud of a lot of the things we've done, too often that pride can seep in a little bit, and you can say, well, we must have all the answers.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of the great things for me was I spent a lot of time in particular in Illinois, Minnesota, to a lesser extent, New Jersey, then Maryland, and other markets beyond. And I was continually impressed by how any market I was in, I could pull something from and say, they do that a little bit better in Massachusetts. They do this a little bit better, right? Yep. So it was this opportunity to constantly learn, I think, that was the most exciting thing for me. And I think that's what made Nexamp and continues to make Nexamp a real leader, is that they not only can do what they do in one market, but the ability to replicate that at scale across markets necessitates that you got to learn the best from each of those to ultimately get where you want to go.
So springboard from Nexamp, you are now working inside one of the most prestigious universities in the world, where many technologies have been birthed at an incubator called the Accelerator. Can you talk a bit about this new role for you and what's what you perceive now that's different in what I've heard you refer to as Climate Tech 2.0?
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Growth Officer at the Engine. We're an incubator and accelerator that MIT started specifically to help a unique type of companies, right? These tough to commercialize technologies that could have the ability to take on one of the biggest challenges facing society, but they needed a different set of supports. And what President Raphael Reif at MIT saw was he saw this great work going on in academic research labs, and yet when it would get licensed or commercialized, it was being licensed and commercialized with a minimum viable product in mind, not with the maximum public impact and benefit in mind. And so we try to help technologists, founders, and teams not just think about what's the first thing that's going to make a buck with their technology, but how do you make the biggest potential impact? And we do that with infrastructure, programs, capital, and other supports that will enable them to make the most of the technology and the work they've done.
I like the term tough tech, and we often in solar will differentiate between software and hardware, and hard tech is often how it's sort of described. How do you couch tough tech when you're talking to potential companies that are interested in being in the engine, or to constituents that are supporting it?
Yeah, so when we think about tough tech, we think about the convergence of science, technology, and engineering to take on one of those unique big challenges facing society in climate, in health, or building the advanced systems to support them all. So when we think about climate tech 2.0 or this next wave of climate technologies, it's building off of the great work and what we've learned from the growth of clean energy and taking that clean energy to decarbonize tough to abate industries. Low carbon cement like Sublime Systems is doing, no carbon steel like Boston Metal is doing. But then also, incredible advancements in superconducting transmission lines like the team at Veer and others are doing, right? So continuing to try to think about how do we build on what we've learned in climate and clean tech 1.0, accelerate, grow, and then spread the benefits of that.
I presume Sublime and some of the other companies that you mentioned are alum of the engine?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we support teams in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
And the great thing with like a team like Sublime, right? They started in an MIT lab. They were supported by the engine on the venture side of the house. They have grown over at Greentown Labs. And then we helped and supported them as they found their first location. And they're going to go out and build a manufacturing facility in Holyoke in Western Mass. So it's
fantastic.
It's this wonderful story of using all of the resources we have here in the state.
Yeah. I've heard you say that showing up the engine is like plugging into an optimism battery. How do you balance the optimism you feel with the reality that this is tough tech, and it often dies on the bench in the lab?
Yeah, so I think, the great part, I'm an in-person person, right? Like I love showing up. Like it's wonderful that technology has allowed us to be together in a variety of ways without having to physically be present. But there's something about being with these teams and listening to a founder talk about how they're going to use their technology to solve one of the big challenges. And then I think, you need to be realistic as you're going about taking on one of these challenges.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is any one quick lesson or quick way around that. I also think it's being pragmatic about the timelines and having partners who are aligned the whole way through too, right? You're not going to be able to fund decarbonizing industries that have been around for hundreds of years as quickly as you're going to be able to spin out a new app. And so long as you have the partners who know that and know just how tough it's going to be, then I think you're able to build the type of supports and the expectations that you ought to have, right?
Is there a particular set of challenges that you find many of these tough tech companies have to, like the chasm they have to cross to commercialize their product? Where do you see most of these companies really struggle when they're first getting into the engine?
So I think one of the things is just thinking about the incredible research that they have done and thinking about it in terms of a product, right?
Yeah.
So like, who's actually going to buy the thing when all is said and done?
Right.
So like, not just I've got a solution, but I've got a product that I can bring out to the marketplace.
Yeah.
That's number one. I think number two is figuring out when's the right time for me to grow out and scale. We're home to about 100 companies. Average headcount is between 12 and 14 at any given moment in our space. But those teams are constantly thinking about like, how long can I stay here versus when do I need to grow? And when I make that jump, do I make the jump to a facility that's 3x? Do I have to wait until it's 10x, right? What does that look like? And then finally, it's making sure that the space they go to will actually enable them to scale. One of the reasons that Sublime is going to Holyoke is they were able to get access to 7 megawatts of constant power and clean power from Holyoke Gas and Electric. We need to make it easier for all of these industrial decarbonization technologies to connect with renewable developers, to interconnect their power to the grid and be able to make the most of it.
One of the things you mentioned was Sublime being able to set up in Holyoke and sort of spur this manufacturing renaissance here in Massachusetts. The increasing focus on manufacturing is a core piece, not just of the previous administration, but now in the current administration. What specific advantages does Massachusetts offer for startups who are really looking to pilot manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, so I think the real sort of benefit of being in Massachusetts, especially if you are a startup that became an idea here, started to grow here, is that the last thing you need to do is have a new regulatory environment to think about as you're growing and scaling. Too often the story that has been told to founders in Massachusetts is effectively that the entire state is Harvard Square to Logan Airport, right? I grew up in Western Mass, as far away as you can get from where we sit, right, and still be in the state.
Yep.
There's a lot that this state has to offer. It should not be the place where you grow and scale every last bit of your functions. We want these teams to be globally significant and have a massive impact, but sometimes that means staying a little bit closer to home to start, to be able to work through the kinks so that you can get it right at a small scale and really grow like nuts at a larger scale.
Tell me about the Solutions Factory. I'm curious how you're thinking about climate solutions, given the time you've had now in the climate space.
Yeah, so again, this is some writing that I'm starting to do, and it comes from a meeting that we had up at the Massachusetts State House. I was introducing some of my current colleagues to some of my former colleagues, and a member of the leadership in the legislature, as we were introducing him to some of the teams, turned to one of his colleagues and said, they've got something for everything. He's like, next thing you know, you're going to tell me you've got something for heat. And I wish I could have said this was the plan, but we flipped to the next one and we had Quays, a deep geothermal team that we get to work with. And I say, yeah, he's like, it's kind of like you got a solutions factory there. And I'm like, yes, I like that. I want to run with that, right? And that's what we want this to be, right? MIT and Harvard, but all of the institutes of higher education in Massachusetts, churn out these wonderful ideas like campuses across the country do. We want them to be able to churn out those ideas and get them out to the world, not just to have sort of a little bit of impact, but to solve big problems. And again, that's what makes me hopeful about this work. You sit with these founders and teams, and you can't help but think they're going to find a way to do it. And my job is to try to help them find that way and to make it a little bit quicker and easier.
I appreciate the positive attitude and the optimism battery. You point out in the first newsletter for Solutions Factory that one of the prevailing positions or emotions that folks tend to have today, it's one that we all experience, is resignation.
Yeah.
So how do we paint a sort of an optimistic, a positive light on climate solutions when in fact most of our day-to-day colleagues who aren't in the climate solution space have this sense of resignation? There's nothing really we can do.
Yeah, so I think for me, when I think about the core of that resignation, the skepticism, the cynicism that a lot of people have, I think at its core, it comes from this belief that the solutions aren't there.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the work that I've gotten to do, whether it's at Nexamp or now, right, is to see the solutions are out there. We have the ability to build the future that we all want. More often than not, what stands in the way are outdated processes or procedures that don't care first and foremost about an outcome, but care first and foremost about doing something the way that we've always done it, right? So if what stands in our way is not the technological expertise, it's not the breakthrough, what stands in our way is a process, we can fix a process, right? These processes were not, chiseled on tablets on the top of Mount Sinai and brought down to us, right? There was a way to solve these things quickly. We invented them. We can stop them, right? So if it's paperwork standing in the way, we can solve that. If we've got someone who can make, high-performing transmission lines, right, or supercomputers to be able to do all the optimizations we need, all right, the tough part's done. We just got to do the process. Give me that. That we can work our way through.
Is there anything that you guys are working on at the engine now that gives you that you feel has the sort of the path to greatest abatement of carbon? Are there technologies that really excite you about that fall in this category of tough tech? I'm thinking of Sublime, obviously attacking the hard-to-abate and cement industry. What else like that are you seeing?
I mean, so there are some of them that are already out there in the world, right, already building some of their facilities. So Commonwealth Fusion Systems, right, is just, an hour up the road without bad traffic up at Devon's, building their pilot facility, and they've announced that they're going to build their first ARC, their first commercial reactor in Virginia. You can't help but be with the team at Commonwealth Fusion Systems and be incredibly excited. I got to meet that team at the Plasma Fusion Center at MIT in 2011. And if you had told me that they would be where they are now, none of us would have believed. Like the joke was that fusion is 20 years away from being 20 years away.
Yeah.
Like that will be commercial in the 2030s. It is going to happen.
That's amazing.
How can you not be hopeful about that, right?
Yeah.
So you have that.
Perpetual energy.
But at the same point, right? Like I was just listening to a panel where one of the policy leads, Jason from Form Energy, was on there, right? Like Form doing long duration battery storage. Like I was a bad battery storage developer. I can tell you having a long duration solution is a game changer, right? Like they are right there on the cusp. We've just got to help them get over those last hurdles.
Yeah. It's to be expected, I suppose, that a prestigious institution with a large endowment and such a deep history of research and science as MIT would have something like the engine. As you survey the landscape, how are the rest of the institutions keeping up in this way? And what advice do you have for other regions or universities to follow in the footsteps of the engine?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, like we know how lucky we are to have had the leadership of President Reif and the vision to establish the engine. And credit to Katie Ray, the original leader of the two organizations, as she built it up and she continues to lead on the venture side. I think the great thing is you've seen other regions, both institutions and at like the regional ecosystem level start to learn. You've seen the federal government start to learn, right? So you see Harvard establishes the grid, the folks in Chicago with MHub, out in Los Angeles with Lacey, the clean tech incubator out there. Now you have the National Science Foundation through their Regional Innovation Engines program, supporting ecosystems across the country. You have the Department of Commerce through their Tech Hubs program saying like, here are the pieces that are going to make this work. Higher ed's a key part of it, but you need to have your entrepreneurial activity. You need to have risk capital involved. You need to have the corporates involved. So it's been a test run for a unique set of challenges, but one that other regions I think have learned from as well.
Yeah. Last question. Is there anything that we're still missing from a market mechanism or sort of fundamentals to growing this sector that that you feel as an industry really needs to spend more time thinking through?
I guess two things, and they're kind of interconnected. That's a bad pun as you come to the answer. Is just like, one, it's got to be a heck of a lot easier to get onto the grid.
That's right.
Right? When I talk with teams about building a pilot facility, they all need a ton of power, especially these industrial decarbonization technologies. And too often I'm thinking, where's the quickest way to interconnect them to the grid? And it ought to be quick and simple and easy everywhere. It's somehow, the more we've done it, the longer it's taken and the more it costs. It's completely backwards, at least in Massachusetts. So we've got to work on that. And then it's just thinking about process, procedures, and implementation. Like I am proud to consider myself and call myself an environmentalist, but we need an environmentalism and a climate sort of set of beliefs that is about building the new future, not about just stopping the bad stuff. And I think too often we're good at stopping the bad. We aren't good enough at building the new.
Well said. Ben Downing is the Chief Growth Officer for The Engine, an accelerator in MIT. Thank you for taking time to come speak with us here at the PowerUp Live stage.
Thanks for having me for the work you do, Nico. Appreciate it.